This delicious challah sandwich bread is literally the perfect answer to dreamy French toast and amazing grilled cheese. We like to use our favorite challah bread recipe braided into regular loaf pans for this easy to slice shape. It's a snap to make perfect challah loaves at home with no junk or chemicals. We have these loaves on weekly repeat. Please be sure to hit that subscribe button right now for more amazing recipes just like this one.
Welcome back to Two Peas in the Kitchen. In today's video, we're going to show you how to make beautiful braided challah loaves. And it could not be any easier. If you've been intimidated, don't be scared. We'll show you exactly how to do this. So we're going to use our stand mixer to make our challah, and we're going to start off first thing with proofing our yeast. So we're starting off with 275 grams of lukewarm water. And I'm just going to put it right in the mixer bowl here. And then we're going to continue on with the process after we've proofed our yeast. And here we have 13 grams of active yeast. So I'm just going to pour that right in here. And the last thing before I mix it all up is half of a teaspoon of sugar. And this helps to activate the yeast. And I'm going to whisk everything up nice and well in here, just to mix it all up. And we're gonna let this sit for 5 to 10 minutes until you'll see a lot of foam on top, and you'll know that your yeast is good as long as you see the foam. And fair warning, make sure before you start the whole process and you batch all the ingredients out, make sure that your yeast has not expired, because we've all done that before, and then you're gonna be very sad because your bread's not gonna rise. So check the expiration date, but if your yeast is so good, you'll see the foam on top. Let it sit about 5 to 10 minutes, and then we'll continue on. Okay, so it's been about 10 minutes, and look how nice and frothy and foamy this is. So we're good to go. We know our yeast is good. And now I'm gonna dump in a few more ingredients here into the mixing bowl, and then we'll use the whisk attachment in our stand mixer to mix it all up. So here we have, this is 600 grams of bread flour. I'm only gonna add about, this has already been weighed out, I'm gonna add about 1.5 cups. It doesn't have to be exact. I'm just gonna use my measuring cup here. I'm just gonna dump it right in here because we're gonna add the flour in stages. So about 1.5 cups or so, okay? And next we have 9 grams of salt. In you go, okay? And 140 grams of sugar. Now this is a raw sugar. You can use plain, regular granulated sugar as well. That's fine too. 140 grams. And lastly, before we whisk everything up together, this is 45 grams of avocado oil. You can really use any kind of neutral tasting oil. If you want to use canola, we tend not to prefer that. You can use sunflower oil, anything that's neutral. You don't want to use a strongly flavored oil because you don't want to taste that in the challah. Okay, so we've got everything in here, and we're going to use our whisk attachment and whisk it all up. Okay, so we're just going to whisk it here until everything is incorporated, and then we're going to continue to add some of the flour. We still have eggs to add. We're going to eventually switch to the dough hook. Okay, so we actually used a silicone spatula to make sure everything was mixed in. You just want it incorporated so that all the flour, none of the flour is visible anymore. Now we're going to add another 1 cup of the bread flour and our 2 eggs. So I'm going to put this back here, put it on low, add our additional cup of flour, bread flour, and then here I have 2 large eggs that we've already beaten, and I'm going to pour those in. Okay, so now we just have the rest of our flour to add. We switched off from our whisk attachment to our dough hook attachment. So we're going to move this back up here. I'm going to turn it on, add the rest of the flour, and we're just going to knead it just slightly until all the flour is incorporated, and then we're going to knead it by hand on our pastry board.
Okay, so after we kneaded that with the dough hook for a few minutes, it's formed like a nice, pretty cohesive dough here. It's a little bit sticky, which is the texture you want. You don't want it like super sticky, but it is a little bit sticky. We're gonna get it out of the bowl and we're gonna finish kneading this by hand. So the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna get a little bit of flour here on the pastry board. You can be pretty liberal with the flour here because the dough is a little stickier now than we want it to be. So we're gonna knead into the dough a little bit of extra flour, and you'll have to use your judgment on the texture of the dough, which I'm gonna show you how it will feel toward the end. So we've got that out of the bowl there. So we are gonna just start kneading that by hand. So it's pretty sturdy already. You can start out giving it a little bit of pressure right off the bat. So it's just gonna be fold and push, fold and push, fold and push, and then you'll just kind of pick up the flour from the different spots around your pastry board as needed if the dough starts sticking. So the dough's a little sticky still, but it's not as sticky as a very wet dough like a focaccia or something like that. So we're gonna just do this for probably about 60 seconds, maybe a minute and a half, incorporating the dough that I have out on the board. If you find that your dough is really sticky, like it's sticking to the board and it's sticking all over your hands, then you can just add a little bit of extra flour right on your board and knead it right into your dough until it's not sticky. Mine is not sticky at all. Mine is actually a perfect texture, so I don't need to put any extra any extra flour to incorporate into the dough. So as soon as I'm done kneading it, I'm gonna show you how you know that your challah dough is done and ready to put in your bowl for proofing. Okay, so I'm just about done kneading here. Just been doing this probably for a little over a minute and a half, and you can see that you're done. Look at how perfect and beautiful that is. The reason that you know you're done is when you stick your finger in like that and it just pops right back. So this is ready to go. And what I'm gonna do is I've taken a little extra avocado oil. I've oiled this big bowl here. Remember, it's gonna rise, so you want a pretty big bowl. And I'm just gonna plop the dough ball right in the middle. I'm gonna cover it up with this flour sack towel, and I'm gonna put it into the proof setting in the oven. Don't worry if you don't have that setting on your oven. Stick it in a warm corner of your kitchen. This is gonna rise for about 3 hours. And I have found that it actually is almost exactly 3 hours every single time. And you'll see that the dough will double in size and it'll feel nice and fluffy and poofy to the hand. So our challah dough we had it in the proofer in the oven for about 3 hours, and look at this beautiful dough ball. It's very light and poofy. It is ready to go. So I am gonna just use a bowl scraper here and get it right out onto, I'm gonna put a little tiny bit of flour on our pastry board, and I'm gonna just get this dough out of the bowl. So the first thing that we have to do is we're going to have to divide this into two. We're gonna be making 2 sandwich loaves. So the first thing we're gonna do is divide this in 2. And so I'm just gonna kind of eyeball it, and I'm gonna throw it on, I've taken out the kitchen scale here, and I'm gonna try to get it pretty even by weighing each side. Let's see how close we are. It doesn't have to be totally perfect. So this one is a little bit less. There we go. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead, I'm gonna just kind of fold that over of the piece that I added, and I'm gonna put that back in the bowl and let that sit while we work on this piece right here. So what we're going to do is we're going to make a braided challah loaf, which we're going to do in a loaf pan. So the first thing we have to do is we have to divide this piece into 3 even pieces. So again, I'm just gonna kind of eyeball it to start, and I'm gonna use my kitchen scale to get us as close as possible. Like I said, this does not have to be totally perfect, but you don't want it to be so out of whack that the braid doesn't end up even. We have one piece here, it's a little bit bigger, so I'm just gonna Oh, now we're really close. Okay, we're good. Okay, so we have these 3 pieces, and what I'm gonna do is, this is just like when you used to play with Play-Doh as a kid. You don't wanna put too much flour on your pastry board because you want it to stick a little bit as you start to roll each of these just into a long dough string like this. So I'm gonna go ahead and do this with all 3 of these, and then I'll come back when I'm done and I'll show you how we're gonna braid them to put them in the loaf. Okay, so we have 3 relatively equal little strands of dough here, and we're gonna go ahead and get ready to braid it, and it's gonna go into a loaf pan. Sometimes when we do challah, we don't put it in a loaf pan, but today we're making sandwich loaves, so it's easier to do that in a loaf pan. So the first thing that we're gonna do is we're gonna kinda join our 3 strands at the end here, and I kinda make a little ball at the end and connect them together like that. And then this is actually the really easy part here. So the first thing that we're gonna do is we're gonna take this, it's just like braiding hair, right? This is not like super rocket science here. So you take the inside one goes to the outside one goes to the inside, and then you just keep kind of continuing to do that. Because we're putting this in the loaf pan, I tend to kind of push it together like that as I'm braiding so that it will form a more compact shape. Whereas if I was doing the challah on a sheet pan, I would maybe stretch it out a little bit more. So we're just gonna continue with that pattern, just like that. See how pretty that's looking? And kind of pushing it together to make it kind of the right shape to fit right into our dough pan, our loaf pan, I mean. There we go, just like that. Oh, this already smells really good. Okay, we're getting here to the end. And so I'm just gonna kind of do, just like I did at the beginning, I'm gonna kind of fold over the edges so that they don't come undone. And then we're left with this nice, compact, beautiful little braided dough contraption there. And so I have a bench scraper here, which I'm gonna use to kind of help me make sure it's not sticking to our workbench. And then I'm just gonna very carefully get this right into our loaf pan. Now this loaf pan I have prepared with just a little bit of olive oil in there to prevent sticking. And then I would just kind of, make sure that it's fitted in there kind of evenly in the middle. This is gonna go back into the proof setting in our oven or into a warm place in your house for about another 45 minutes. It will rise again. You'll see that it'll fill the bottom of the loaf pan and start to rise up the side. So you do want to make sure when you've got it in there that you've got it right in the middle, but there you go. It looks perfect. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to make the second one, and then I'm going to stick them back into the proofer for about 45 minutes.
Okay, so we're ready to continue on. If you haven't preheated your oven yet, you'll want to preheat to 375 degrees. So here we have our beautiful braided loaves, and they've been in our proofer, which was set at 85 degrees Fahrenheit, for about 40 minutes. And again, you don't have to have a proofer, it's just temperature control. So you can just leave it covered on a counter for about an hour or so. Depending on the temperature, you might need a little bit longer. How do you know? So if you look at them, they should visually seem obviously bigger in size. And when you touch them, it should be soft and pillowy. And you may even see some air bubbles actually coming right here. You can see this air bubble coming to the surface, and you'll know you're done that way. So we're going to give our loaves here a little egg wash, and then it's going to go in the oven to bake. So I just have here 1 egg yolk and 1 teaspoon of water. Whisk it all together, and I'm just going to use the silicone brush here and brush all of the challah loaves, the whole surface. And what this does is it just gives you a nice, beautiful golden brown color when it's baking. So I'm going to continue to do this, and then we'll talk about the baking. All right, so I've brushed everything with the egg wash. Look how beautiful they look. And if you want, you can put in, if you want to sprinkle sesame seeds on top or whatever topping you'd like, you can do so right after you brush with the egg wash. We're just going to leave them plain because we're using them as sandwich loaves. So now you're going to want to put your loaves in the oven, 375 degrees, and bake it for about 24-25 minutes. I like to err on the side of caution and check frequently. So about at the 20-minute point, go ahead and check to make sure things aren't burning. And you'll want your loaves to be nice and golden brown. And actually, when you take them out of the loaf, this is a nice trick to use when baking bread, and you knock the bottom of the loaf, it should sound pretty hollow. So let's put these in and then let's take a look later. Okay, so our hollow loaves are done. Look how gorgeous they are, nice and golden brown. And both of our loaves here. Okay, so I'm gonna pop this one out. Be careful you don't burn yourself. So this one should come out pretty easily. It's a pretty non-stick pan. Here we go. I think it's perfect. And if you hear, I can feel it's nice and hollow. It feels nice and hollow. So I'm gonna put this on, let it cool on a wire rack here before slicing it. Do let it cool completely because it'll destroy the texture of your loaf before actually slicing it.
Okay, so our hollow loaf has cooled. It is so beautiful. And one of the reasons we like to do our challah in a loaf pan is it makes it really easy to slice for grilled cheese or French toast or for sandwiches. So I'm gonna go ahead and slice it here because we wanna show you what it looks like inside. It is just beautiful. And I'm gonna go ahead and give it a little taste here. So I'm gonna rip off a corner here. It's perfect. This is the best challah recipe. And we like to just slice it as we need it. It'll stay fresher that way. But I've never run into a problem where we don't run out of challah before the challah runs out of freshness. But one of the things you can do, since this recipe makes 2 loaves, is I will freeze one of them, which the easiest way to do that is just to let it cool all the way and then wrap it up in, I usually wrap it first in parchment and then I'll just put it in foil and in some plastic and stick it right in the freezer. It'll freeze great for 3 months. I don't slice it before I freeze it. And the other one, I just store it in plastic and it'll stay fresh for several days. This makes amazing French toast. And one other little tip, if you do have a problem with your bread browning too much on the bottom or burning on the bottom, if you put a sheet pan under it when you bake it in the oven, that will help with that problem. It'll just protect the bottom of your bread a little bit. So this is our favorite challah recipe. We know you're gonna love it as much as we do. It's absolutely delicious and you saw how easy it was. We hope you enjoy.